So the early organization chart of a startup business is the founder and a couple of people working for them, doing whatever they do, right? But as the business evolves and becomes more complicated, it necessarily has to have layers of management, because not everybody can report to the founder as the business grows. It'll be just too much diffusion and too much decentralization so that the business won't be necessarily managed properly. So having levels of management is important, and building that into the management succession plan is extremely important and helpful. So what happens when owners have disputes? That's sort of the next rough water that we have to navigate. And you know, we may have a 50-50 ownership structure. I have a lot of these, and it's really interesting. The clients who come to me with their problems usually come to me after they've been in business for a year, 5 years, even 10 years. There's a disparity in the way the two owners start to think. There are some clients that we've represented for 50 years at this firm who have 50-50 ownership structures that have been in partnerships and in business for 50 years. And they get along. They're able to manage through it. They know how to communicate with each other. So part of it is bringing in good advisors to help with the communication process. And that's not something that people normally think of. They automatically think, well, we're at loggerheads. We need to break apart or pursue each other in litigation or mediation. That's not necessarily the answer. One of the best strategies is to bring in somebody who's a business facilitator who understands the business that they are in, to try to get the founders, the owners, to communicate better with each other. And then we have the situation with minority shareholders. And anytime you have a situation where you've got a business dispute, you never know what's going to happen. So when families have disputes, we need to study the situation and understand the types of situations that come up. Or when partners have disputes, we need to study the situation. So let's do a little case study. We've got Billy and Betty, two women. And they've been friends for a long time. And they decide to go into business together because they are friends and they know they get along. And sometimes friends make good partners and sometimes they don't. So everything starts off, everything's going along smoothly, and you know, everybody's working and business is starting to grow. 5 years along, Billy is working her tail off. She's bringing in more business than Betty. Betty's a little bit older, maybe she's 3 or 4 years older. She's like, you know what, Margaritaville sounds good to me. I'm going to Key West, I'm going to take some more vacations. You run the business, we'll keep splitting the profits 50-50, because that's our agreement. Who knows what's going to happen next? Everybody knows in this room what's going to happen next. Billy wants more. She wants more compensation. She wants more recognition. Betty says, we agreed to 50-50. This is my business. I helped build it up. She did. But it's being built even more by Billy, who's building a management structure, and the people are reporting to her. Betty wants to sell the business. She's had enough. All right, you don't like it? Let's sell it. Let's get rid of it. I'm going to sell it now. I'm going to force a sale of the business. We're going to sell this business. Betty says, you can't force a sale of the business. I have a 50% ownership interest. You can't force me to do anything. This is a deadlock. This is a stalemate. What do we do here? Anybody?
Buy her out.
Buy her out?
Right.
For what? How are we going to buy her out?
There's always financing structures.
What would you suggest we do here? Other than just saying buy her out. All right, so we begin the process of negotiating a buyout.
Yeah.
Betty has a lawyer, Billy has a lawyer. Are lawyers the right people to deal with on this issue necessarily? Depends on the lawyer, I guess. If it's a lawyer who's a transactional lawyer, who has negotiated buy-sell deals, yes. If it's a litigator or a divorce lawyer who's helping out because they're a friend? The answer is no. And so in these 50-50 scenarios, and I've been involved in, I don't know, 50 of them, 100 of them over my career, what I've found is if you get a lawyer on the other side who is a transactional lawyer who's dealt with a lot of these types of situations, then you can negotiate, usually try to negotiate something. But it also depends, it's not just the lawyers, it depends on the clients. I've got this situation right now with a pretty significant government contracting business where it's 50-50. And the two owners have been co-owners for 15 years. And they built it up to a very significant level. One of the co-owners wants to sell it now. It'll probably generate a sales price of between $12 and $15 million, which is not bad for the two owners, right? But we also have phantom stock that we set up for some of the key employees, which will dilute the amount going to the founders. And it's not a significant payout to the phantom stockholders, but it's not bad. The other guy wants to keep growing his business. He wants to sell it at $50 million. That's his objective. He wants to grow the business, reinvest the profits in the business. So in getting him to buy out his partner, he doesn't want to pay too much to the partner. And the partner doesn't want to necessarily sell it for too cheap. Getting an appraisal is a good starting point, but it's usually not the end of the story. So in this situation, what I would recommend, if we cannot negotiate a buyout, and it's usually the case that it's very difficult to do that because it's always comes down to the valuation. If we had a valuation mechanism built into the shareholders agreement, we wouldn't have to worry about any of this stuff, right? So if one party wants to sell, you can build in a provision in the agreement that says, well, I want to sell. And the other party doesn't have to buy, they could offer their shares for sale. And you can go back and forth. And every time you do that, you can ratchet up the purchase price above whatever the agreed upon value is. You can also build in an appraisal mechanism that says if one of the parties wants to leave after some period of time, they have the right to do so. But it's got to be on terms that are agreeable to the other party. They've got to be able to afford it. So they may not be able to come up with the cash from a bank or a lender to buy out the other guy's shares right away. It may have to be staged over a period of years. And the lender may demand that. So it's a structuring issue, right? So it's valuation and structuring. But you can build all of this into a shareholders agreement. And we do that. We try to do that at the front end. The problem is, a lot of this stuff comes up after the fact because nobody, when they're starting the business, wants to spend the time and the money, particularly on a lawyer, to draft a detailed shareholders agreement that anticipates what's going to happen if everything blows up. The other thing we try to do in these agreements, in addition to having a process, an appraisal process, and a mechanism to allow for parties to leave and the other party to buy them out, is a dispute resolution mechanism. Alternative dispute resolution that doesn't require necessarily a buyout. So we will often build in mandatory mediation at a minimum. Now, mediation means, how many of you have been involved in mediation with your clients or otherwise? So I don't do mediation. I bring in a litigator to help me with the mediation. I'm not a litigator, but I usually sit there with the client, and I've been through multiple mediations. And when you have a mediator, the general rule of thumb is, you bring in a mediator, it's lose-lose for everybody. You heard of win-win, everybody wins. Mediators come in with the attitude, and they tell you at the front end when they're establishing the ground rules for the mediation, that both parties are going to lose something in this. And you're not going to feel like you walked away totally happy. That's mediation. I don't know about divorce mediation. I don't see how you can ever feel that way about divorce being a win-win. Everybody loses in divorce. But in a business divorce, in a business split up, mediation is a good solution. It just may not be the best. Before you get to the mediation, consider bringing in, again, the business facilitator, a communicator, somebody who knows valuation, but somebody who also knows how to run a business and somebody who knows how to communicate between two very different points of view and maybe help them bridge the gap without forcing a mediation. So mediators are usually former judges, lawyers, who specialize in trying to reach a conclusion within a day or two of beginning the task. So mediations are usually done in 1 to 3 days. And they're grueling. If you've ever been through it, it's start to finish absolutely grueling. Before you get to the mediation, bring in a business facilitator. They're in all shapes and sizes. They may be business coaches. They may be affiliated with human resources firms. But I have found these people by inquiring around the area for different industries and different circumstances. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Again, it depends on the personalities of the individuals involved. If somebody makes up their mind that they're not going to do what you want them to do, and they're only going to do what they want to do, you're going to end up in a dispute. And the dispute will end up potentially in litigation.